This is about Just Stop Oil. They've obviously been in the papers and the press a number of times over the recent days. Now, this story is in the Telegraph, I think, this morning. Oh, it's the Sun this morning, actually. Just Stop Oil leaders, it's reported by the Sun, are holding secret training sessions because they are now plotting to bring London to a halt on a single day of mass action. There is a video that is circulating now where one activist evokes suffragettes, allegedly, using arson in a rabble-rousing speech, essentially trying to enlist more eco-zealots to create a campaign of chaos. Now, it transpires they've got a North London office, a very smart-looking North London office, and they are given, these recruits are given something like 4 hours of training. All of these are linked to other hardline groups. It's been called a centre of activism. So they're linking up with activists from Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain and Animal Rising. So what did this investigation show? Well, they essentially plan to shut down London this summer. Essentially, they have been given tips and techniques on how to avoid being arrested when they are actually protesting. They are also being trained how to avoid abuse from onlookers. And of course, as we know, they've been staging sit-ins on motorways. They've glued themselves to buildings. Also, they've damaged works of art. And of course, that snooker protest, which was really extraordinary as well. When you look at the cost of all of this nonsense, the Met spent £7.5 million in just 9 weeks in autumn last year on policing Just Stop Oil protests. Also, 12,000 work shifts were dedicated to clearing roads, patrolling motorways as well. Now, this office block is in Dalston in East London, and apparently it's cost £2,000 a month to actually rent that. Joining me now is Peter Bleksley. He's a former Met Police detective. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Really good to talk to you this morning. I mean, clearly this is more organised than I realised. When you look at that building that the Sun has uncovered, this is a very smart building. They're clearly very organised. And actually what they're doing is extremely targeted. They're training all these recruits. They're intent on causing widespread damage.
Yes, and we know, of course, that they've already caused uncalculable damage to the economy by stopping the traffic on so many occasions, at so many different locations. And this level of organisation that they now have about themselves comes as no surprise. But I'd just like to give credit to Isaac Brosen from The Sun and his undercover colleague who went in there and managed to expose this level of organisation. I hope the Metropolitan Police are reading and listening, and that they're going to have a mindset change in order that they will deal with these protests more robustly so that law-abiding members of the public can go about their daily business.
Well, absolutely right. I mean, if you remember, the Met Police didn't do anything with the Just Stop Oil protesters. I think it was actually Lee Anderson who intervened and said, why the heck aren't the police actually doing something about this? And therefore, they then moved the protesters on. So it took that to happen, for that intervention from Lee Anderson. Then Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Commissioner, actually argued they couldn't move the slow marchers. You know, people around the country are thinking, what on earth are the police doing?
Yeah, well, actually, Sir Mark Rowley has repeatedly got this wrong, in my opinion, because the Highways Act of 1980 clearly states that anybody who obstructs the highway in any way, let me just reinforce those 3 words, please, in any way, is guilty of an offence. Now, Mark Rowley has got himself in a bit of a tangle due to a High Court ruling that was handed down some years ago about highway obstruction, but that was in relation to a case that happened outside Excel at an arms fair, and the ruling was that the disruption had to be significant before the police could take action. Well, the law is an evolving thing, and the law is always tested by courageous CPS if they can summon up the spirit. And frankly, in this case, the Met haven't. They've taken their interpretation of the word significant, and they've used it, quite frankly, as an excuse to facilitate these protests and to therefore interpret the law instead of enforcing it. And now we know the government are going to bring in more legislation which will take the matter out of Rowley's hands, and perhaps he and his colleagues will actually do their job.
As you say, it's a brilliant piece of reporting by The Sun, actually. The fact is the reporter infiltrated that building, went to those training sessions and so on. But actually, when you read what they're trying to do, it's really shocking. They're trying to get 1,000 people marching every day, 1,000 every day, 50 marches every day. They want to shut down London. The real concern will be the coronation, of course, whether you're in favour or not in favour. There are lots of high-profile people there, lots of members of the public there. The Metropolitan Police must be extremely worried about what they're planning to do over the coronation weekend.
Yes, although sadly, of course, the police and the armed forces and the security services, because they'll all be involved in the coronation, did have a rehearsal of sorts with the very sad funeral of the late Her Majesty the Queen. So in that regard, they're a bit match fit, should I say. But this security operation around the coronation will be huge. It does have new and slightly different elements to it, like the Republican movement and the fact that Just Stop Oil and others might not be so deferential towards the coronation as they were to the funeral. So it will be a vast operation, but we really need the Met Police and other police services to understand that their job is to enforce the law and not to interpret it as so that it suits them, and to really keep not only the coronation safe and secure, but the economy, keep the traffic moving. That's what drives such a large part of the economy. And for the police to almost stand aside and let these protests grind traffic to a halt is quite frankly unforgivable.
Well, I agree totally, and I think many of our listeners and viewers would agree with that as well. Just in terms of the powers the police and security services have over the coronation weekend, do they get special powers during a moment of national significance?
There's a lot of statutes, lots of legislation, including the Public Order Act and much, much more, which will enable them to deal with any disruption, I'm sure. It may be possible that they will apply for special exclusion zones so that people can be stopped and searched without any valid reason. I suspect those might well be put in place. But the sheer numbers of people involved in this operation, which will stretch from the sewers to the skies and beyond, with the unseen involvement and influence of the military, of satellites, of helicopters, and so much more, I'm sure will ensure that the coronation will be a respectful event for those who want to enjoy it, to watch and do exactly that.
Well, I think you make a really good point here. It's a group, a minority group, is trying to disrupt all sorts of things. So we heard about people trying to disrupt all sorts of things, including sporting events. And this is a minority of people imposing their views on the majority of the public who actually, quite frankly, deserve to have a nice time.
Yes, I completely agree. Word is that the Republican movement will be respectful and they will merely stand there with their yellow T-shirts and their placards. We shall have to wait and see. Because, of course, in recent times, we've seen a lack of deference towards the King as opposed to the Queen. We've already seen a situation where eggs have been thrown at the King, and that was quite unthinkable with the late Queen, of course.
Indeed.
So there is a mind shift. The police are going to have to be on very high alert for a wide array of potential threats. As I say, they have an element of rehearsal, sadly, from the funeral, and I sincerely hope that the event is allowed to pass off so that those who respect and enjoy the King and the royal family are allowed to do that.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Very good to talk to you, Peter. That's Peter Bleksley, who is a former Met Police detective.